Chapter 7. I think we should tell Sam after breakfast, Roan said as he pulled the bacon from the grill. Have Michelle on standby in case we need her help. I've already contacted Jonah, and he has Michelle, Kira, and Talia ready to step in if need be, Justin replied. Good, Chet said. Fuck, I can't believe how nervous I am. I know we need to let her know what we are, but I'm so fucking worried about how she's going to react. React about what? Sam asked as she entered the room. Hi, sweetness, you're just in time for breakfast. Sit down and we can all eat. Roan began to take the plates over to the table. After breakfast was done, Sam got up to clear the table, but Roan halted her by placing his hand around her wrist. Sit down, sweetness, we need to talk. Have I done something wrong? Sam asked Roan with a worried expression. No, Sam. We just need to explain a few things to you. Do you want more coffee? He put off the inevitable for a moment. Roan sighed when she shook her head. Taking a deep breath, he let it out slowly and glanced at his brothers. They were watching their mate intently. You know how you saw first Justin's and then Chet's eyes change to gold? Well, there is a reason for that, Sam. We're werewolves, sweetness, and you are our mate. Roan observed Sam intently and saw her eyes widen and her pupils dilate. He sniffed the air and scented her nervousness. Emotions ranging from awe to fear and then disbelief flitted across her face. She rose from her chair and backed away. What? Honey, please don't be scared of us. We would never do anything to hurt you. Have we given you any reason to be afraid of us? Justin asked. No. Sam gulped loud enough for Roan to hear. Sweetness, we will protect you with our own lives. Please don't back away from us. Roan appealed to her and held his hand out in a placating gesture. B-, but there's no such things as W- werewolves. Darlin', we are living proof that there are. Come and sit down, Sam. You know, we wouldn't hurt you. Please don't let the fact that we are a little more than human alter the way you look at us, Chet said and moved toward her. When she didn't try and back away again, Roan let out the breath he didn't know he'd been holding and his taut muscles relaxed slightly. He walked to her side and took her elbow, then guided her back to her seat. What do you mean I'm your mate? Sam asked. Wait, is everyone in this house a werewolf? Yes, they are, honey. We are all related. Since we work together and it's a trait of our species, we like being close to the ones we care about. You are our mate, Sam. We knew it the moment we met you. But how could you know that, and what do you mean by our mate? Do you mean I'm mate to all three of you? Honey, a mate is the human equivalent of a wife. You are meant to be a wife to all of us. How is that even possible? You want me to mate with the three of you? I'd never even heard of such a thing until you introduced me to your cousins and their wives. How does that even work? Sure, darling, it's okay. Don't panic. We won't do anything unless you allow us to, Chet said quietly. How do you know I'm your mate? I knew the moment I caught your scent, sweetness, Roan explained. It was so delectably exquisite I had the urge to change into my wolf form and roll around in it. Once I smelled you, I just knew you were meant to be ours. We are drawn to you physically as well as emotionally. All three of us just want to wrap ourselves in your body and in the comfort of your arms and your heart. But I know it's way too soon for you, sweetness, so we will give you all the time you need to get used to us. If you decide to accept us as your mates, we will make love with you and bite into your flesh to claim you. The claiming bite won't cause you any pain, Sam. You will only feel pleasure at our touch. If I did agree and let you claim me, would you have to make love to me at the same time? And if so, how is that even possible? We don't have to claim you together, honey, Justin clarified. We can do it separately, but if we ever made love to you together, one of us would take your sweet pussy, the other would love your pretty ass, and one of us would fuck your mouth. Roan could see thoughts flitting across her face and wanted to keep reassuring his mate that she had nothing to worry about from him or his brothers, but he waited patiently while she processed the information. How does biting me claim me? She asked. When we claim you, our DNA enters your body and then you belong to us. Your senses will be much better when we mark you. Your hearing, sight, and smell will be more enhanced, Chet answered. So it will change me? Yes, honey. You won't turn into a werewolf, but your senses will be like ours. Our strength is greater and our senses sharper. We should also be able to communicate with you telepathically over time, once we have claimed you. Justin expounded. Can you do that now? Sam asked, and Roan could hear the awe in her voice. I mean telepathy? With each other? Yes, we can, darlin'. We have our own private link we use to communicate with each other and another common pack link we use to communicate with the rest of our family. Does it hurt when you change? Roan accepted the change of subject and listened while his brother answered her. No, darlin', Chet explained. By the time you get to our age, our bodies are used to the change. We only begin changing shape once we hit puberty. The first couple of shifts make our bones ache, but it's only similar to growing pains. After that it becomes easy. Do you only go furry when it's a full moon? Sam asked, and Roan could see the gleam of amusement in her eye. No, sweetness, we can change whenever we wish to. The moon seems to pull at us more when it's full, but we don't have to change if we don't want to. Roan gave her a wink and smile. Are all the women werewolves too? No, darlin', Chet replied. There are only 5 women in the entire world who are shifters, and 4 of those were born with the werewolf gene. So who wasn't? Who wasn't what, honey? Who wasn't born with the wolf gene, and why can she shift if she wasn't born? Kira was shot, sweetness, and the only way to save her life was to change her. We don't go around changing humans. The process is agonizing and too violent. Kira was lucky she managed to survive the change, Roan explained. So how is the change done? Honey, I don't think you want to know that. Yes, I do. I wouldn't have asked if I didn't. Roan took her hand into his, and Justin leaned forward to take her other hand. Sam, the change is made by ripping into the stomach and organs. The wolf has to go deep so DNA from the work can travel and take root in the tissue and blood of the human. It's not very often that they survive, so we don't change human beings unless it can't be avoided, as was the way in Kira's case. Justin clarified. Oh my God. That's horrible. Poor Kira, she must have suffered so much. No, she didn't suffer from the change, sweetness. Kira was already unconscious and slipping away from her mates. The gunshots she sustained were lethal, Sam. It was the only way to save her life, Roan explained. You don't have many women in this house. How come? We think that even in the womb, male traits are so dominant that they overpower female ones. Blake, one of Talia's mates, is a doctor and he has been looking into the science of werewolf conception. Seems that his suspicions of male domination have been confirmed. We don't know how to circumvent this phenomenon yet, but knowing Blake, he won't give up until he finds a solution, Chet answered. So if you're all dominant, who's the boss? Jonah is the most dominant and senior alpha of the pack, but Mikhail and Brock rule alongside him with Michelle, Roan said. Oh, that explains it. What does, honey? Justin asked. When I first met Jonah and his brothers, I felt intimidated by them, but especially Jonah. They all have this aura of power surrounding them, Sam explained. Yeah, they do, but Jonah has more dominance in his little finger than anyone else in the pack. If he decides to put his foot down, he can use his voice to get you to bend to his will. Mikhail and Brock can do the same, but when Jonah has his mind set on something, then he rules. His final word is pack law. Everything you're telling me seems so surreal. I mean, I believe you, but I don't think I will fully understand or believe werewolves exist unless you show me. So, which one of you is going to show me your wolf? Come here, sweetness. Roan gently tugged Sam onto his lap, then watched as Justin and Chet stood and moved back a few paces. He didn't take his eyes from his mate while his brothers stripped out of their clothes. He nearly groaned out loud when she gasped and he smelled her leaking pussy. Their little mate was turned on by the sight of his naked brothers, and that gave him hope. Hope that she trusted them enough to become aroused even after what they had just told her. She didn't try to get off his lap. Instead, she wrapped an arm around his neck and stared at his brothers. He could see the tip of her pink tongue peeking out from between her lips and wanted to bend his head to take a taste of her, but he held back. This was an awesome moment for their mate, and he wanted to see every nuance and expression which flitted over her features. The sound of bones popping permeated the air, and Sam moved her free arm to cover her mouth with her hand. At first she looked horrified and then concerned, but when his brothers had finished changing forms, she smiled. That smile lit up her whole face, and little dimples peeked out next to her lips. Oh, you're both so big. Can I pet? She asked in her husky voice. Roan finally slid his gaze from her face and watched as his brothers moved toward her in their wolf forms. Sam surprised him when she didn't hesitate. She withdrew the arm she had around his neck, and he stifled a growl as she moved on his lap, nudging his hard, throbbing cock. Then Sam sunk her fingers into his brother's coats. "Your fur is so soft. I thought it would feel much coarser," she whispered. But he heard her clearly. His mate stood up and walked in between his brothers. She was so petite that their heads were on level with her chest. Turning toward him, she eyed him up and down and wrinkled her nose at him. "I want to see you in your wolf form too." Roan got to his feet and moved away from the chair and began to undress, watching her the whole time. He saw her breath hitch in her throat and smelled her creaming pussy when he stood before her naked, letting his human self fall away. He called to his wolf. Not once did he remove his gaze from hers, and when he was standing before her on 4 legs, he slowly moved closer. Hearing her laughter as she sunk her fingers into his coat was one of the best moments of his life. When she moved her fingers to behind his ears, he rumbled with contentment deep in his chest. "You are all such gorgeous wolves. I can't believe I'm not having any trouble accepting this. I guess it comes from reading so much. I love to read about mythological creatures, and sometimes I find myself dreaming that they really do exist. The universe is so big, who knows, maybe aliens are real too. God, listen to me ramble on. Why don't you change back? It's nearly time to head into work," Sam suggested. First Justin, then Chet changed back and began to dress. Roan had to really concentrate hard on pushing his wolf back. His animal was trying to dominate him by staying in wolf form, but he wasn't about to give in. Finally he re-dressed and watched the sway of Sam's hips as she left the room. As much as he loved and craved being near her, it was nice to be able to relax for a moment. Since the first time he had laid eyes on Sam, his wolf had been pushing to stake a claim. "I don't know how much longer I can take this. My wolf nearly got away from me and took over." He was pushing to bite her here and now. Chet began pacing. "We have to give her time to get used to us, Chet. We've only just told her what we are." Justin finished loading the dishwasher. "I know that and you know that, but our wolves don't give a shit about any of it," Chet ground out. "They want her and don't care about the mechanics of things. If you don't calm down and control your wolf, I am going to make you stay home today," Justin commanded. "I don't care how much your beast is pushing. You will not do anything to jeopardize our chances with our mate." Chapter 8. It had been a long day and Justin was tired. He and his brothers had conversed with their cousins and alphas, Jonah, Mikhail, and Brock, about their investment properties in the security system, which had apparently just fried. He didn't like knowing the security around the pack grounds and house wasn't working, but they couldn't do anything about it until the next day at the earliest. Chris and Blake had tried to work on the circuit boards to get the system up and running again, but it seemed their efforts had been futile. Even Greg, Jake, and Devin had taken a look, but they couldn't do anything either. It looked like they needed a whole new system. After spending the morning working on the security system, he had spent the afternoon and night at the club. No matter where he was or what he was doing, Justin was going out of his mind with desire for their mate. It had been 4 weeks since Sam had come to live with them, and still she hadn't said anything about letting them claim her. But since Sam was much more comfortable around him, his brothers, and their pack, if he had to wait another 4 weeks for her, then so be it. He would often find her in the living room on the sofa talking with Michelle, Kira, and Talia. The 4 women had become great friends. While Sam was safe at the pack house, Justin still hadn't found anything on that guy, Gerard Long, who had been stalking his mate, and that frustrated him more than anything. There had been no other sightings of the man who had been watching Sam in the parking lot of the motel, and Justin wondered if the fucker had given up, whoever he was. Maybe it had just been a coincidence. After all, like those bastards who had tried to feel Sam up in the back hallway that first night at the club. He, Roan, and Chet made sure to touch and kiss Sam frequently, and she touched them in return. Some of her gestures had been downright provocative, and that gave him hope that she would eventually consent to mating with them. Whenever he pulled her close for a hug, she would give a little wiggle and rub up against him. She did it to his brothers as well, but he wasn't sure if she was aware of what she was doing. At night he would often sit with her on his lap, and again she would shift around until she was comfortable enough to settle. down. But each time she moved, he had to clench his jaw to control his raging libido. His little mate's squirming caused his hard cock to pulse and leak pre-cum. He ran in his wolf form every night and jacked off in the shower just to keep control of his raging desire. Tonight was no different. Now all he wanted to do was take a shower and crawl into bed with his mate. Sam had been sleeping with him and his brothers since the first night, and that didn't help his arousal problem. Even now he could smell her scent all over him, and his wolf was pacing restlessly beneath his skin. Justin opened the bathroom door and froze mid-stride. Standing before him in all her naked glory was his mate. He perused her body from the top of her head down to the tips of her toes and inhaled deeply. His wolf pushed against him, trying to get free, but he pushed back hard. "Honey, you need to get out of here now. Go to the spare room and lock the door," Justin commanded in a deep rumbling voice. Instead of doing what he said, Sam walked up to him, stood on tiptoes, cupped the back of his neck with her hand, and pulled his head down. That action was all it took to break his control. Justin growled and wrapped his arms around her delectable little body. He lifted her up until her crotch was aligned with his. He lowered his head and took her mouth. Thrusting his tongue between her lips, he tasted every nuance of flavor she had to give. No one woman had ever tasted as good as his mate. As soon as he had seen her, his cock had gone from its perpetual semi-hard to full-blown engorgement in less than a second, and now it was pulsing against the zipper of his jeans and his balls were aching. The urge to release his erection and bury himself in her hot, wet pussy was all he could think about. Sliding his tongue along hers, he then flicked it upward and caressed the roof of her mouth. The little moaning and mewling sound she made as he made love to her mouth fired his arousal even more. His wolf butted against him, urging him to claim her, and he knew if he didn't get control he would soon be in trouble. Slowing the kiss down, he finally withdrew his lips and rested his forehead against hers. Breathing heavily, he tried to regain his senses. "Sam, I can't do this. If we continue on this path, I'm going to end up making love with you, and my wolf is pushing to claim you." He bent until she had her feet back on the floor. Then he released her and stepped away. "I have thought about this long and hard," Sam whispered. "You and your brothers treat me with so much respect and have never raised your voices or hands to me. I trust you, all of you. I thought I was in love with my ex-husband, but it turns out that was just an infatuation. Peter claimed to love me, and he showed me just how much by abusing me. Not once have you claimed to love me, but you, Roan and Chet, have showed me with your actions that you care for me. I would like nothing better than to make love with you all and for you to claim me as your mate." "Are you sure, honey?" Justin asked. "Once we start this, we won't stop until you're ours." "Yes, I'm very sure, and I don't want you to stop. I want this more than anything I have ever wanted before. I'm a dominant man, honey. I like to control what happens in the bedroom. Are you prepared to submit to me, to us?" Sam nodded her head in affirmation. "Then go and get into my bed. I'm going to take a shower. We'll join you in a little bit." Sam left to do his bidding immediately. His wolf was howling in his head with victory, and Justin knew if he didn't take the edge off his flaming libido he wouldn't last the night. He stepped into the shower, washed quickly, and then grabbed hold of his aching cock. He didn't need to fantasize too much since he had been on edge since the moment he woke, and within moments was spewing cum against the tile wall. Justin turned off the shower and toweled off quickly. He opened the link to his brothers. "Roan, Chet, Sam has consented to mating with us. Meet me in my bedroom." The two howls that echoed in his head made him smile. Their patience was finally about to be rewarded. From the moment she had met the Domain brothers, Sam had been drawn to them. Little by little, both their actions and their words had shown her that they cared for her. She didn't know if what they felt for her was love, but hopefully that emotion would come in time. She felt as if she somehow belonged here with these people, but especially Justin, Roan, and Chet. They took care of her, reminding her to eat when she forgot, holding her on their laps after a long day, and generally looking after her. Even if Sam didn't need them to look out for her, it was so nice to be able to lean on them and not have to face the world alone. The three men had come to mean a great deal to her, and slowly but surely they had worked their way into her heart until she couldn't bear to think of living without them. She had spent the last 3 weeks observing the other women and their men, wondering how a relationship with more than one male worked. What she had seen had helped make up her mind. Michelle's, Kira's, and Talia's mates treated them like queens. The women were so happy and in love that Sam felt a little envious. All she ever wanted was to be loved for herself. She had even tested her men by taunting them with her body, wiggling and squirming all over them, seeing how they would react. They had passed her tests with flying colors and hadn't put the moves on her without her consent. She had finally realized what she had been doing after kissing Justin earlier in the bathroom. His chivalrous actions had been the clincher. She didn't want to be without them in her life. Now that she had decided to mate with them, Samantha was filled with excited energy and nervous arousal. She had been waiting for this moment for what seemed like so long. She couldn't sit still. Having done what Justin commanded, she was now in his bed, stark naked with the covers pulled up to her chin, but in a half-sitting, half-reclining position, leaning against the pillows resting on the headboard. She kept moving her legs and arms restlessly and clutching at the quilt. Her libido had been simmering for weeks, and now that the big moment was here, she was so turned on that she was scared she would climax from just one touch. The last thing she wanted to do was turn them off with her desperation. Never had she felt like this before, and she was also worried she wouldn't be able to reach an orgasm and satisfy their needs. Groaning at her contradictory thoughts, she tried to settle her nerves down and breathed in and out a few times to control her rapid pants. Didn't seem to help. The only orgasms Sam had ever achieved had been self-induced. Peter had told her repeatedly that she was frigid, and he didn't know why he bothered ever having sex with her, let alone marrying her. When he had reached for her in the darkness of the night, she had just lain beneath him passively and prayed the deed would be over quickly. He had never made sure she was ready for him, and she had often found sex painful. Even though she was nervous about making love with the 3 Domain brothers, she wasn't scared. She was more than ready to receive them into her body, and in fact had been since the moment they had met. So she wasn't worried about pain. Looking up when she heard movement near the bedroom door, her breath hitched in her throat at the sight which met her eyes. Justin, Chet, and Roan were making their way toward her, and they were gloriously naked. Justin was tall, muscular, but lean. His gray eyes pinned her with his hungry gaze, and she felt herself sinking into his depths. His muscles were toned and rippled as he shifted. His hard, long cock bobbed up and down. The head of his penis was an angry reddish-purple in color, and he had a drop of clear fluid on the tip. She could see the striations of his muscles beneath his tanned skin, and that just made her hotter. He had an aura of dominance and power surrounding him that turned her on, and she couldn't wait to see how he would command her in bed. Knowing she could trust them not to hurt her and to take care of her, she felt the last of her nervousness dissipate. As she stared at the 3 men, her lonely, empty heart filled with such emotion she had to struggle not to cry. Glancing away for a moment to get her emotions back under control, she looked up again. Roan's brown pools glittered at her with such heat she felt the flames from where she lay in bed. He was bulkier than Justin and slightly shorter, and even though his stance was aggressive, with his hips jutting forward and his arms crossed over his chest, she knew he wasn't as intense as Justin, although he could be just as dominant in his own way if the situation warranted it. She'd had a taste of their dominance just yesterday when she had gone outside the club for a breath of fresh air. Justin and Roan had come to find her and scolded her for putting herself in possible danger when she was supposedly being stalked. Justin had been too mad at her for not letting them know where she was, and Roan had been the one to lay down the law. He had told her she was to let them know where she was at all times, and if she wanted to go outside on her break, she was to take one of them with her. She had thought they were going over the top, but from the fierce look of determination in their eyes, had decided not to argue at that moment. Roan took a step toward her and drew her eyes to his crotch. His cock wasn't as long as Justin's, but it looked thicker in the girth. It was also leaking out pre-cum, and she saw the way it pulsed with his heartbeat. Licking her dry lips, she glanced over at Chet. He was just so damn big. She didn't know he was the most light-hearted of the 3. She would have been intimidated by his size, bulging with muscles from his shoulders, biceps, and pecs to his washboard abs, slim hips, and large sturdy thighs. He made her salivate with desire. And his cock was huge. It was as long as Justin's and slightly thicker than Roan's. She gulped with trepidation as Peter's small penis flitted through her mind. Quickly she pushed that image aside. There was no way she wanted him in her head at this very moment, and she felt a little guilty for the intrusion. Be very sure this is what you want, sweetness, because once we start I don't know if I'll be able to stop, Roan rasped. I'm sure, as long as you really want this too. Why would you think we wouldn't, honey? Justin inquired. You are our mate. And we want to make love with you and claim you more than anything right now. We have been on tenterhooks the whole time you have been living here and have dreamed about this moment. She didn't really want to tell them of her worries because she knew her face would turn pink with embarrassment, but since these three men had been honest with her from the beginning, she could do no less. Taking a deep breath, she looked from one to the other and back to Justin again. I'm not very good at sex. My ex told me I was frigid, she explained quietly, and quickly lowered her head. Look at me, Samantha, Justin commanded. Tilting her head back until she was looking into Justin's gray eyes, she jutted her chin forward with false bravado. You are not in the least bit frigid, honey. If there was a problem with sex in your marriage, then it was all your ex-husband's fault. There is no way in hell that you are cold. Did he take the time to prepare you for his lovemaking? Justin asked. No. There's your answer, sweetness. Foreplay is a big part of making love, and it is your partner's job to make sure your body is ready, Roan stated firmly. They moved toward her at the same time. Justin climbed onto the bottom of the bed and Roan and Chet got up on either side of her. Roan reached out and took her hands off the edge of the quilt and pushed it down, exposing her nakedness to their eyes. You are so perfect, honey. Justin smoothed his hands up and down her calves. We are gonna love you so good. She opened her mouth to respond but couldn't think of anything to say. Sam snapped, her teeth closed. Just as Justin gently nudged her thighs apart, Roan cupped her cheek and turned her head his way. He took her mouth at first with such gentle emotion. Tears pricked the back of her eyes, and as he deepened the kiss she gave herself over to their gentle, loving touch. She moaned into Roan's mouth when Chet began to suckle on one of her nipples and Justin caressed her wet folds with the tips of his fingers. Fuck, Justin groaned. You are so wet, honey, and you smell so fucking delicious. I have to have a taste. Justin lapped at her pussy hole, which made her buck her hips up to push her vagina closer to his mouth. Moaning as he bestowed pleasure on her, Sam pushed her fingers through Roan's hair and pulled him in closer. She couldn't believe she had three men touching her all at once. The pleasurable sensations running through her were overwhelming. Gasping for breath when Roan lifted his head, she looked down her body as Justin licked up through her folds and laved over her clit. Crying out on a sob of pleasure, she closed her eyes and arched her body. You taste so fucking good, honey. I love how your body leaks out more cream for me to lick up, Justin rumbled out against her slit. Sam couldn't have answered even if she had wanted to. It seemed she had lost her voice along with her brain power. Her capacity to think coherently had floated away on a cloud of desire the moment they had begun to touch her. As she turned her head and opened her eyes, Roan's throbbing dick caught her attention. It was so close that all she had to do was lean forward a little and lick. Unable to stop herself, she did just that. The salty sweet taste made her crave more of his essence. Opening wider, she took the head of his cock into her mouth and was rewarded by his groan. Laving the underside with her tongue, she set about pleasuring him in earnest and sucked him in farther. Fuck, sweetness, your mouth is heaven, Roan gasped. Sam hollowed out her cheeks and sucked harder, pulling him into the back of her throat, then easing back up, making sure to gently scrape her teeth over him. Fuck yeah, Roan rasped and gripped a handful of her hair. Sam whimpered around her delectable mouthful when Chet sucked on a nipple, while pinching the other between thumb and finger. Justin pushed a finger into her pussy and began a slow pump, all the while licking over her clit with rapid flicks of his tongue. The muscles in her cunt clenched and released around Justin's digit, and he sped up his ministrations. She sobbed around Roan's cock and then cried out when Justin added another finger. Sam was so wet she could feel her juices leaking out of her pussy and down over her asshole. She had never felt anything like it. Her whole body was a mass of quivering desire and overwhelming need. Justin wiggled his fingers around in her, and her hips shot up off the bed. God, if he kept that up she would come in minutes. It looks like you found her sweet spot, Justin, Chet rumbled out in a deep voice. Yeah, he growled against her pussy. Tingles of warmth spread out over her as Justin caressed against that spot. Inside her again and again. She had no idea she had erogenous zones inside her pussy. Peter had never taken the time to learn her body, and even though she had brought herself to climax with clitoral stimulation, she had never had a toy or used her fingers inside to bring herself off. Molten liquid lava traversed throughout her pussy, into her womb, her belly, and down her legs, making her toes curl, pulling her mouth from Roan's cock. She gasped for breath as the internal muscles of her pussy began coil tighter. Arching her neck, she closed her eyes as her body bowed off the mattress. She was so close but couldn't seem to go over the edge. Justin must have known what she needed, because he caged her clit gently between his teeth and sucked hard on her sensitive bundle of nerves. Sam screamed as her cunt clenched down on his embedded fingers, her body trembling. As she climaxed hard, stars formed before her closed lids and she thought she was about to pass out from pleasure overload. As her pussy contractions ebbed and finally diminished, and her breathing began to slow, she opened her eyes to find 3 sets of eyes staring at her hungrily. You are so fucking sexy when you come, honey, Justin rumbled. I have to. Have you? Chapter 9. Justin had never tasted ambrosia until he had tasted his mate's sweet cunt. Her flavor was a mix between sweet wine and salty brine, and one taste would never be enough. When he had sent her over into climax, he nearly followed her. She looked so beautiful when she came, he couldn't wait to send her over again, but this time he intended to be buried balls deep inside her. His wolf was just below the surface waiting to claim her, and he'd had a hell of a time seeing that she climaxed before he sunk his dick into her hot, wet pussy and bit into her flesh to make her his. Sitting up between her thighs, he moved up closer to her until his aching cock touched against her slippery folds. Placing his hands at her hips, he held her still and slowly began to forge his way inside her. The heat from her body wrapped around the crown of his dick, making him groan. Holding still, when she whimpered and her pussy clenched around him, giving her time to adjust to his intrusion, he breathed in deeply, trying to control his urge to plunge into her hard and fast. Are you okay, honey? He asked through panting breaths. Yes. God, you're so hard. I want more. Please. I'll give you what you need, Sam. Just relax and let me do all the work, he rumbled in a deep voice. You feel so fucking good, honey. I've never felt anything like it. This was meant to be, Sam. You're mine. Justin surged forward until his cock was touching her womb. Pushing his brothers aside, he covered her body with his and ravaged her mouth. Sweeping his tongue into her mouth, he tangled it with hers and began to thrust his hips, sliding his cock in and out of her sheath. When his need for oxygen grew too great, he lifted his head and looked down at Sam. Her eyes were glazed over with passion and her chest, neck and cheeks were flushed pink. She looked so fucking sexy. His cock jerked inside her. Her cunt rippled around his dick, letting him know she was close to the edge, so while she was watching he let his wolf take some control. Canine teeth elongating in his mouth in preparation of claiming her, he watched her watch his eyes and knew they would be glowing gold. Just as her eyes rolled back in her head with pleasure when he thrust deeply, he bent down, licked her skin, where shoulder and neck met, and sunk his teeth into her flesh. She screamed out her climax as her blood filled his mouth. Her pussy contracted repeatedly around his dick, sending tingles of warmth shooting through his body. His balls drew tight to his body. He growled against her shoulder and then howled as he shot load after load of cum deep into her body. When the last shudder left his body, he licked his claiming mark, knowing his healing saliva would close the bite immediately. Lifting his head, he looked down at his mate. Her eyes were closed, and she was still panting heavily. She opened her eyes and looked at him with such wonder that he felt joy and love fill his heart. He wanted to tell her he loved her but didn't want her, thinking he was just saying it because of the sex, so he placed a gentle peck on her lips and eased out of her tight, clasping pussy. Then he moved off to the side and collapsed beside her. He felt as weak as a newborn kitten with his shaking limbs, but he smiled with contentment. Only his mate could affect him so. Roan moved from beside Sam to give Justin room to flop down next to their mate. He couldn't wait to make love to her and claim her. From what he had Seen as Justin fucked her, it was an incredible experience. His brother's legs still gave slight tremors as he lay beside her. Now sitting between her splayed thighs, he leaned over her and kissed her, deeply and passionately, letting her feel all his love and the passion he felt for her. He blanketed her small body with his and aimed his cock for her pussy. She was so fucking wet and hot, he couldn't help but growl into her mouth as he pushed forward. Heat enveloped his dick, and he groaned as her sheath clenched the head of his penis. He was thicker than Justin and didn't want to hurt Sam in any way. Being careful, he slowly began to push into her and groaned as her muscles and flesh parted and her sheath gloved him. Holding still again, he waited for a signal from her that she was ready for more. He was only halfway inside her and wanted to go gently with her. Sam withdrew her mouth from his, gasping for breath. She reached out with her arms and tugged on his neck until his chest was touching her breasts. She wrapped her legs around his waist and pulled him in close with her strong leg muscles. He let her have her way just this once and followed her direction. He surged into her until the tip of his cock was as deep as he could get it, with his balls touching her ass. Groaning with the exquisite sensations of finally being inside his mate, he withdrew carefully and then pushed back in. Using his arms, he braced himself again and watched her face as he began the erotic dance of advance and retreat, increasing his rhythm incrementally, his hips thrusting, sliding his hard cock in and out of her wet heat. He let the exquisite friction build. When her breath became a sobbing cadence of his name in her sultry, husky voice, Roan lost it. Pulling back, he forged his way into her sheath with hard, sharp, fast thrusts. He growled when she clenched around him, and he locked gazes with her. Her lips were open, and she was chanting his name as if it were a litany. When he felt the warning tingle at the base of his spine, he knew he was getting close to release. Bending to her neck and shoulder on the side opposite to where Justin had claimed her, he licked her skin, preparing her. Calling on his wolf, his eye teeth lengthened in his mouth and he bit down into her flesh, howling against her flesh as she climaxed and bathed his cock in her cum, her scream of pleasure joining his. He let go of his control. His balls drew up in his scrotum, and then semen spewed up the length of his shaft and into his mate's pussy. His whole body quivered, feeling depleted as his strength left him. Sam's body continued to squeeze him with aftershocks and milked the last of his cum from his body. Gently pulling his cock from her body, he ran his hands over her hips and stomach in a soothing gesture until her breathing went back to normal and her body stopped shaking. Placing a chaste kiss on her forehead, he flopped down on the other side of her and looked over at Chet. He began to get worried when he saw the feral gleam in his brother's eyes. Chet was so close to changing into his wolf, he was barely hanging on. Watching his two older brothers make love with her and bite her to bond them together had almost sent him over the edge of reason. Crawling down the bed when Roan took his place beside Sam, he inhaled the scent of her cunt mixed with the seed from his brothers. He wanted to go slow and take things easy with her, but he didn't think his wolf was going to let him. Gripping her rib cage, he flipped her over onto her stomach. Hey, what are you? Shua, honey. It's all right, Justin said. Chet won't hurt you, but he's barely in control. He won't let his animal take over, but he's on edge after watching us make love with you and claim you. He wants to take you the way a wolf would take another wolf. Is that okay with you, Sam? What do you mean? On your hands and knees, mate, Chet commanded in a deep, gravelly voice and sighed when Sam complied. Just relax, Sam. Chet rubbed a hand over her luscious little backside, then used both hands to hold her still. He covered her back with his large body and in that instant felt so damn big, strong, and masculine. She was so tiny he nearly hid her from view. Moving slightly, he pulled his hips back and thrust into her with one powerful surge. She cried out, and he cursed that he could have hurt her. Did I hurt you, darlin'? God, I'm sorry. No, you didn't hurt me. You feel so good inside me. More. Please, I need you. Fuck me. Hard. Chet growled and did what she asked. He set the pace hard and fast from the outset. After nuzzling her hair aside with his nose, he clamped his teeth against the back of her neck, showing his dominance. His muscles rippled as he set about sending her over into rapture before he followed her. Wrapping an arm across her chest and holding her hip with the other, he shuttled his cock in and out of her pussy, the mewling and whimpering sounds she made only heightened his arousal, and the fact that she was unconsciously submitting to him filled him with joy. The loneliness and restlessness he had been feeling since the other members of the pack found their mates drifted away. When she pushed her ass back toward him and yelled as her cunt rippled around him with orgasmic pleasure, he thrust forward and bit down into her with his elongated teeth. Her blood filled his mouth, and what he felt next blew him away. He could feel his brothers through their mating link as well as Sam. Felt like a strong rope ran from her heart out to all three of them. She was the center and anchor of them, and her bond with them only seemed to strengthen the bond he had with his brothers. He howled against her neck and let orgasmic rapture take over. With his balls on fire he roared and shook as he climaxed, shooting his mate full of his cum. Limbs shaking, he rolled to his side, taking Sam with him, and he buried his face in her hair against her neck. He held her tightly against him as his heart filled with love for the one woman who would always be bonded to him. "Are you okay, darlin'?" Chet asked, and when she didn't answer he lifted his head and looked over her shoulder to see her face. "Sam. She's asleep," Justin answered. "Fuck. I love her so damn much. I'm never letting her go," Chet whispered to his brothers through their mental link. "She's so fucking precious," Roan said with awe. "Yes, she is. Did you feel the way she bound us together when Chet claimed her? That was wow. Just fucking wow. I can't wait until we can make love with her together. I want in that sexy little ass so bad. We all want that, but the most important thing is to keep her safe. She is our responsibility now, but I still don't know anything about this Gerard Long guy or whoever it was watching her in the parking lot of the motel. We'll keep her safe," Chet reassured Justin. "We can talk about it later. Right now we need to concentrate on our mate's needs. I'll go run a bath and clean her up so she's comfortable." With that, Chet picked Sam up and carried her to the bathroom, his brothers following. Sam opened her eyes as warm water enveloped her. She blinked a few times to clear her blurry vision and looked up at Chet, who currently held her lovingly on his lap. Lowering her head, she breathed in his delicious, unique masculine scent and nuzzled into his chest with her nose. "Hey darlin', how are you feeling?" "Good," she said with a contented sigh. "How did we get in here?" "You passed out after making love with Chet, honey. He carried you into the bath thinking you would be more comfortable after cleaning up," Justin answered from beside her. That's nice. Are you sore, sweetness?" Roan inquired. "No, I'm fine. My muscles are a little stiff, but that's all." "Are you hungry, honey?" "Yeah, actually I am. Must be all that good loving we gave you, darlin'." Chet chuckled. "I don't feel any different. Didn't you say I would see, hear, and smell better than before once we were mated?" "Yeah, we did. I think you're just too tired to notice the difference. Let's go down to the kitchen and get you something to eat, and after a good night's sleep you'll feel much better," Justin suggested. "Okay," Sam answered and reached for a bath sponge, which was quickly taken from her. "What? We'll take care of you, sweetness. Just lie back and relax." Roan began to wash her. "I'm perfectly capable of washing myself." "We know you are, honey, but we like taking care of you." Justin helped Roan to wash her. Tears pricked the back of her eyeballs. Closing her eyelids to hide her emotions, she let Justin and Roan wash her while Chet held her. Sam had never felt so loved and cared for in her life. Peter would never have seen to it that she was comfortable. He would have climbed on top of her, not caring whether she found any pleasure in the act. Then he would have rolled over, totally ignoring her until he fell asleep. These three men, part human and part animal, had given her more love and affection in the last 4 weeks than her husband had ever shown her in all the years of their marriage. Chapter 10. Roan led Sam into the dining room and sat down next to her at the long table. They were just in time for dinner, and the room was full of pack members. Smiling when Michelle, Kira, and Talia waved at Sam, he saw her blush and wave back. The men of the pack sniffed the air, and the cheers, howls, and well wishes were yelled out to congratulate him and his brothers now that they were mated. The noise in the room diminished as Jonah rose from his seat at the head of the table. "About damn time," Jonah growled good-naturedly. "I would like you all to welcome the newest member into our pack. We are pleased to have you with us. Samantha, you fit into this pack well and have become an invaluable member of this family." Thank you, Sam replied shyly and then sighed with relief. Roan could tell she was glad when she was no longer the center of attention, because she relaxed into her chair when conversations started up again. When Angie and Cindy began to bring food to the table, Sam jumped up from her seat and hurried over to the kitchen counter. She helped the two women bring the food to the table and tried to whisper quietly to the elderly housekeeper, but he heard every word and knew the others of the pack could hear her as well. Angie, I would love to help you cook the food when I'm not working at the club. I love cooking and would like nothing better than to cook for people who would appreciate it. Thank you, Sam. That would be really nice. It's getting harder and harder to keep up with everything since the pack is expanding so rapidly, but I don't want you to overdo it since you're working as well. Why don't you discuss it with your mates and see what they have to say? Angela suggested. I don't need to ask them to do anything, Angie. If I want to help you, then I will, she said with exasperation, and Roan saw her roll her eyes. Roan felt the hackles on his neck rise as his mate unconsciously challenged him and his brothers. He was about to call her over and talk to her quietly, but Justin beat him to it. Samantha, come here. She turned toward him and glared at Justin, then turned her back on him. Hearing a couple of gasps from the younger Omegas, he looked at his pack members and glared at them to shut them up, then turned back to Sam. He figured she could feel their eyes on her from the way she shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot, but she continued to ignore him, Justin, and Chet as she conversed with Angie. Sam, come here now, Justin demanded again, but this time he used his wolf, the power in his voice compelling her to follow his demand, so she would have trouble disobeying him. Sam stomped over to Justin, placed her hands on her hips, and glared at him. What? Roan had to hide his grin as her gaze slid from Justin to him and to Chet. Raising her chin with belligerence, she shifted her eyes back to Justin. You don't want to do this now, Justin. We are in a room filled with pack members and should do this in private, Roan suggested. Fuck, you're right, Justin replied. Okay, I guess we'll have to wait until we go back upstairs again. Who says it was unconscious? Sam answered. I knew exactly what I was doing. I know how dominant you three can be, but especially you and you. Sam pointed a finger at Roan and Justin. If I want to help Angie and Cindy in the kitchen, then I will. You have no say in that. I will defer to you in the bedroom and when we are outside this house, but here I will have control of my own life. I can't let you take me over. You'll suffocate me just like he did. I won't have it. Is that clear? Angie, please save us some dinner, Justin stated firmly, never taking his eyes off their mate. Rising to his feet, he growled and with a lightning-fast move slung Sam over his shoulder. He took the stairs 3 at a time. Roan and Chet hurried after them. Put me the fuck down, Sam yelled as she beat on Justin's back. Roan couldn't help but laugh when Justin spanked her on the ass. Ow, that hurt. It was supposed to. I didn't know you had a potty mouth, honey, but I don't like it, Justin replied. Ooh, that is so hypocritical. You and your brothers swear all the time. How come you're allowed to and I'm not? Because it sounds cheap and trashy coming from the mouth of such a beautiful woman. Well, it sounds just as bad coming out of your mouths. It's just my luck to find myself mated to men who have double standards, Sam grumbled. Hey, why? Are we back in the bedroom? I'm hungry. You challenged us in front of the whole pack, sweetness. We can't let you get away with doing things like that, Roan said and sat down on the bed beside her after Justin lowered her into the middle. Look, I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have said what I did, but I've had enough of being controlled by men. My ex eventually took me over until I was only a shell of my true self, and I won't go back there. I have only just found myself again, and I'm not going to let you take over my life like he did. Honey, we don't want to take over your life. As far as we are concerned, your life is your own, but while that sicko is out there stalking you, we are going to do everything within our power to keep you safe. Yes, we like that you are submissive in the bedroom, and we love that you have the gumption to stand up for what you believe in, for what is right for you. But you have to remember, we are part wolf, Sam, and if you challenge us whether consciously or not, we will rise to that challenge. It's what makes us who we are, Justin explained. Okay, I can understand that. I won't ever challenge you in front of the pack again, since you have no choice but to retaliate. So what happens now? Well, right now I want nothing more than to bury my hard cock into your Pretty little pussy, but since I can hear your stomach growling, I guess we'll have to put that off for a little while, Justin replied. But as soon as dinner is over, we will be coming back up here and making love with you. Sam gulped and drew in a ragged breath, which they all heard. She gave a slight nod of her head. Chet took her hand in his, helped her from the bed, and led the way back down to the dining room. Roan noticed she kept her head bent and her cheeks were tinged a pink hue when they entered the room. She didn't speak until their meal was over, and that was only to offer to help Angie clean up the kitchen, along with Michelle, Kira, and Talia. Just as the women finished up in the kitchen, one of the young Omegas burst into the room. There's been a perimeter break. The garden shed in the northeast corner is on fire. The male pack members as well as Kira rushed out of the house and took off toward the back of the property. Greg, Jake, and Devin took the lead, and Roan and his brothers surrounded their alphas in case it was a trap to lure them out into the open. Chris, Blake, and James were instructed to stay at the house to keep an eye on the women and Michelle's baby. He sniffed the air and tried to get the scent of the intruder, but the smell of smoke and gas permeated the air, drowning everything else out. His wolf made his presence known and tried to get him to shift, but he pushed his animal back down. Until he knew what they were up against, he intended to stay in control. The last thing he wanted was for a human to find out about their species. The Omegas had already started fighting the fire with garden hoses as well as buckets of water, but the flames were too intense. Roan dug his cell phone out of his pocket and called 911. By the time he hung up, a truck was on its way, but the fire was threatening the surrounding trees. Roan looked back toward the house. The fire had a long way to go, but the wind would eventually push it toward the house. He took a bucket of water from one of the Omegas and threw it toward the shed. Something crashed down inside and threw sparks into his face. Roan winced and stepped backward, coughing as smoke caught in his lungs. Jonas called out through the common pack link for Chris, Blake, and James. Come quickly. We need to keep it from spreading. The others came running moments later. Roan was glad for their help, but he felt uneasy. As the fire truck came screaming down the road, he stepped back from the flames and scanned the area using his enhanced wolf sight. Nothing. He didn't see one fucking thing out of place. I don't like this, Roan muttered as the hair on his nape stood on end and his gut dropped with dread. Neither do I, Justin replied. Why would someone set the garden shed on fire? Chet asked with bewilderment. Shit. This was done as a distraction. Get the hell back to the house and make sure our women are safe, Jonah yelled. Sam had just settled on the sofa in the living room with Michelle and Talia. After Chris, Blake, and James raced out to help the others with the fire. Dread settled in the pit of her stomach, but she didn't let it show. The other women didn't seem worried. Michelle yawned and finished feeding baby Stefan, and then placed him over her shoulder to burp. The woman looked exhausted, and Sam knew that she couldn't have had much sleep the previous night. Her head slumped onto the back of the sofa and her eyes closed. Why don't you give me Stefan and go and have a bath or shower? Let me take him for a while so you can relax, Sam suggested. Michelle opened her eyes and looked at her hopefully. Are you sure? He's been very finicky the last few days. I think he's cutting teeth. Yes, I'm sure. Take Talia with you. She looks like she could use an early night. Gee, thanks so much, Talia replied with a snicker. These damn hormones are driving me crazy. Wait until you have a baby to care for, and then you'll know what tired is, Michelle said around another yawn. Go, and don't worry if you don't have the energy to come back down. Stefan's safe with me. I know he is, Sam. Thank you. Just hand him over to one of my mates when they get back. Sam didn't watch the women leave the room. She only had eyes for the precious bundle in her arms. Rubbing his small back, she was surprised when he let out a belch loud enough to rival a full-grown male, and she laughed. I'll bet that feels a lot better. Placing a kiss on his head, she inhaled the sweet scent of baby and talcum powder. What she wouldn't give to hold her own child like this. If she was blessed, maybe one day soon she would conceive. Again. She caught movement from the corner of her eye and turned her head. She froze and gasped for air as she felt the blood in her head drain away. Willing the lightheadedness away, she took a deep breath and then another as she stared in horror at the man who had been her nemesis for nearly 6 months. Gerard Long stood in the doorway of the living room, smiling at her evilly, with a long-bladed knife in his hand. He moved toward her and she quickly gained her feet, backing away and searching for someone to help her. Of course, everyone was either upstairs or outside battling a fire. She could hear Cindy and Angie in the kitchen but didn't want to call out and put them in danger. I've waited a long time for this moment, bitch. You and I are going to have so much fun. Sam's heart pounded fearfully in her chest, but she didn't let that fear control her. She needed to keep a clear head so she could protect Stefan. She would give her own life before she would let Gerard harm the baby. Slowly, working her way around the sectional sofa, she kept her eyes on him. He followed her every move but didn't stop coming toward her. When she had worked her way around to the back of the couch and he stood away from the exit, she took the only chance she had. Wrapping her arms around Stefan and hunching over him to protect his small body, she spun and took off. She ran as she had never run before, but she could hear Gerard close behind her. She reached the door to the carport, but as she flung it open, searing pain stabbed through her back. Stumbling in agony, she pushed the discomfort away and concentrated on getting Stefan to safety. Glancing back over her shoulder, she saw Gerard laughing insanely as he leaned against the door jamb. Then he moved back inside and out of sight. Her knees gave out, and she sobbed with anger because she couldn't push her body to keep going. Roan seemed to materialize out of nowhere. "Roan," she screamed, "take the baby and keep him safe." Roan enveloped her and Stefan in his arms. Sighing with relief that Michelle's baby was safe, she let the darkness take her. Roan took the lead back toward the den. Just as he reached the beginning of the landscape gardens, Sam burst out through the door with Michelle's baby in her arms. She was covered in blood. He roared with fear and fury and leaped the last few yards toward her. He reached her just in time to catch her as she stumbled toward the ground. Scooping her and the baby into his arms, he cradled her in close to his chest. "Sam, you're covered in blood. Where are you hurt?" he yelled with terror. When she didn't answer him, he gently kneeled on the ground, careful not to jostle her and hurt her further. He handed the baby to Brock as he came up beside him and began to look for Sam's injury, turning her on her side in case she got sick. He examined his woman, panic-stricken when he found blood seeping from what looked like a knife wound on her back. "The other women are safe and unharmed. They didn't see what happened, but the scent of human male is prevalent throughout the house. Pack members are searching for the fucker," Mikhail said in a deep, harsh voice as he hurried toward them. Sam was watching the baby so Michelle could take a shower. The other women were in the kitchen, and as you already know, Kira was out with us. "Fuck. We left the women unprotected and fell for the oldest trick in the book," Jonas said angrily. "Blake, get your bag. Samantha has been stabbed," Mikhail called through the common pack link. Roan was only vaguely aware of what was going on around him. He was too busy trying to stem the blood flow from the knife injury in Sam's back. He growled when anyone other than his brothers got too close to his mate. He and his wolf were furious that his woman had been hurt. "Roan, you have to let Blake take a look at our mate," Justin stated calmly. "We need him to attend her so she doesn't lose too much blood. Pick her up and bring her to the infirmary." Roan could see Justin's relief when he gently picked Sam up off the ground, being careful not to jostle her and hurt her any more than she already was. He walked quickly to the doctor's office, which had been set up only in the last 12 months, and thanked God his alphas had had the foresight to do so. The last thing he wanted was to have to call for an ambulance or to rush Sam to the hospital. He didn't want her off the property or out of his sight or strangers attending to his mate. Carefully placing Sam on the bed on her side, he stepped back as Blake moved toward her. The sight of his cousin and the pack doctor cutting away his woman's shirt was one of the hardest things he had to watch. Justin and Chet came to stand beside him, and he knew neither of them would be leaving this room anytime soon, just like he wasn't. Blake prepared a syringe full of painkillers and shot it into Sam's arm. She groaned and was about to turn over onto her stomach, but Roan stepped forward, took a hold of her shoulder, and knelt at her side. "Sure, sweetness, you're going to be all right. Don't move and let Blake fix you up." "Shit, where's the baby?" Sam asked, panicked. "He's back with his mother, honey," Justin replied. "Now be a good girl and stay still for Blake. Samantha, I've given you a shot of pain meds, but I have to give you another." so I can disinfect the wound and stitch you up. I'm sorry, honey, but it's going to hurt, Blake explained. Sockeye, Sam slurred. Roan was thankful that her pain medication was kicking in. He could tell by her glazed-over eyes, dilated pupils, and slurred speech that she wasn't used to taking medication or just had a low tolerance for the stuff. He held her shoulder in a firm grip and placed his other hand at her waist. Justin placed a hand on her hip and Chet placed a hand on her thigh to hold her still. He nodded at Blake to let his cousin know they would keep her steady. Sam squeaked when Blake began to inject the local anesthetic and tried to lift her arm, but Roan stopped her by clasping her hand. She dug her nails into the back of his hand and punctured his skin, but he didn't flinch. Even though he wasn't responsible for her wound, he felt as if they had failed their mate. They hadn't pulled everyone to the site of the fire. They could have fought the human and kept Sam safe. He wondered if Long had been the one to wreck their security system so he could gain entry to their land. If they had been on hand, Sam would probably now be tucked up in bed with them or on the sofa in the living room talking to the other women. Fucking hell. I hate this, Justin spat through their link. We should have known it wasn't a coincidence that this happened when the security system was down, Chet added angrily. It's not your fault, Sam muttered as Blake began to stitch her skin back together. You couldn't have known the fire was set to distract you all. We should have known it was a setup, sweetness. We never leave the women unattended, and we should have been even more vigilant with the alarm system. Down, Roan said vehemently. Blake finally finished suturing Sam's flesh, and as he tied off the thread, her hand went lax in Roan's. He glanced down and sighed with relief. Their little mate was fast asleep. She hadn't been able to fight the effects of the pain medication any longer. Keep this waterproof bandage on, but keep an eye out for blood seepage, Blake said. That could mean she's pulled her stitches. Call me if your mate experiences too much pain and I'll give her another shot. No strenuous activities or heavy lifting, and make sure she gets plenty of rest. You can take her up to your rooms. Have they found who attacked her yet? Roan asked. No, Jonah growled. Don't worry, we'll get this bastard. He can't have gone far, and when we find him, he's a dead man. Just concentrate on looking after your mate. Roan turned back to Blake. How long before the threads come out? It depends on how fast Samantha heals. Now that you've all claimed her, it should be around 3 days. Thanks, Blake. Justin watched as Roan gently lifted Sam into his arms. Chet moved in and covered her with a blanket, and Roan left the clinic. Justin, did you find out what happened from your mate? Jonah asked as they stepped inside. No, we'll have to wait until she wakes. Sorry, Alpha, but I don't think our mate deals well with pain medication, Justin replied. I want a full account as soon as she's conscious. Call me and we'll come to her. The last thing she is going to want to do is move around too much, and I don't want to cause her any unnecessary discomfort, Jonah said. Thanks, Jonah. I'll call as soon as she wakes. Roan continued carrying Sam up the stairs to their room on the 3rd floor. Chet had gone on ahead to get the bed ready for their mate. Striding toward the bed, he gently lowered her and cursed when she moaned. Being careful of her wound, he and his brothers removed her clothes and tucked her into bed. He undressed, climbed in beside her, and pulled her until she was lying half on top of him, her cheek resting on his chest, her breasts against his belly and her legs entangled with his. Roan didn't want her inadvertently rolling onto her back and hurting herself. He had every intention of keeping her in his arms all night long. Justin and Chet stripped off and climbed into bed too. She was surrounded by them, and he vowed no one would ever get to her and hurt her again. Chapter 11. Sam woke with her back driving her crazy. If she could have reached it, she would have torn at her itchy skin to relieve the irritation. Sitting up, suddenly she looked about the room. Sighing with relief, she realized she was back in her room in the pack house. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back. She gingerly arose from the bed and carefully pulled on some clothes and left the suite. She was down the stairs and in the dining room before she knew where she had been heading. All the people looked up at her with concern as she scanned the room frantically. Her knees began to buckle when she spied baby Stefan sitting on Michelle's lap. Thank God, she whispered and reached out to steady her weak body. Justin was at her side a moment later and lifted her up into his arms. What's wrong, honey? Are you in pain? No. I just had to make sure Stefan was safe, she replied and hit her face against his chest. Bring your mate over to the table, Justin. I'd like to have a word with her, Jonah commanded. Justin carried her over to the seat Mikhail vacated and sat down with Sam on his lap. He held her gently but securely, and she was appreciative because she was shaking like a leaf. Here, have some coffee, honey. That will help warm you up again. Angie shoved a mug of coffee into her hands. Sam clutched it gratefully and let the warmth penetrate her cold palms and fingers. Thanks, Angie. Sam, I want you to tell me what happened last night, Jonah commanded in a gentle voice. I was sitting in the living room on the sofa, holding Stefan until he fell asleep so Michelle could take a shower. I heard about the fire, but I knew you would all have it under control, and I so love cuddling with Stefan, so I just stayed where I was. Talia had also taken the chance to bathe, and Kira was outside with you all, she explained, then took a deep, steadying breath. He came after me. I'm so sorry. I should never have come here. I've put you all in danger. I'll leave as soon as I can pack my stuff. You aren't going anywhere, mate, Justin commanded in a gentle voice. Who was it, Samantha? Gerard Long. He came inside when everyone was gone and he was holding a knife in his hand. I had to try and get away. I couldn't let him hurt Stefan. Oh God, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. Hiding her face against Justin's chest, she gave in to her sobs of fear, anxiety and guilt. The last thing she had wanted to do was put any of these people in jeopardy. She had been so selfish mating these 3 men when she wasn't safe. Now she had put them all in danger too. She couldn't live with that. If Gerard had hurt Stefan, she would never be able to live with her conscience. Samantha, you have nothing to be sorry for, Jonah said quietly. If anyone is to blame for what happened, it is us and the bastard who attacked you. It was our duty to protect you. I knew he could come after you, and then I fell for the oldest trick in the book. A diversion. Please don't leave. Stay here with your mates. We promise you will be safe here. The new security system will be installed today, and there is no way in hell anyone else will ever be able to get in here without one of us knowing about it. The only reason we didn't smell that bastard was because of all the smoke from the fire. I want to thank you for protecting my child. If you hadn't been there, I don't know what would have happened. Stefan could be dead right now. You shouldn't be thanking me. It's my fault that Gerard was here, she sobbed. Then she turned to her mates. I can't believe you told them. How could you? Trying to push off Justin's lap, she gave up when he wouldn't release her. She let her forehead bump onto his chest. We only told the others what they needed to know to help keep you safe. And it's not your fault, honey. You didn't ask him to follow you or come after you, so get that thought out of your head right now. You can't control what other people think or do, now can you? Justin asked. No. That's right. So don't you dare go running to try and protect all of us. As you we should be protecting. I'm sorry we failed in our job to keep you safe. But there is no fucking way it will ever happen again, Justin affirmed. Okay. She sighed and then sniffed. Thanks for keeping my baby safe, Sam. Michelle sobbed emotively. Sure. Sam brushed aside the praise, still not comfortable since she was to blame. Why don't you have some breakfast, darlin'? Then you can go and take a shower, Chet suggested. Sounds good. 'Cause I'm starting to get hungry. Sam's stomach took that opportune moment to growl loudly. Everyone around the table burst into laughter, which helped to lighten the mood, but she knew she wouldn't be comfortable until the threat of Gerard Long was no more. After breakfast, Justin helped her to stand. Roan and Chet rose to their feet as well. Make sure you don't get those stitches wet, Samantha, Blake reminded her. With a smile, she waved at him and smiled back to let him know she would abide his dictates. She let her men lead her out of the room. Justin pulled her into the bathroom after him, turned the shower on and began to undress her. Sam slapped at his hand. I can undress myself. Please just leave me be. I need some time alone. We aren't going to let you hide from us, Samantha. I know you still feel guilty about what happened, but you shouldn't. You had nothing to do with this. How the fuck can you say that? If I hadn't come here, baby Stefan would never have been put into any danger, she said angrily, her breath panting from between her lips. I don't want to hear you speak like that again, Sam. If you do, I will put You over my knee and spank your ass. Justin glared at her through narrowed eyes. You just fucking try it, boo. Put me down. What the hell do you think you're doing? She screeched from her upside-down position over his shoulder. His hands held her firmly so she couldn't wiggle around and pull her stitches. I warned you, honey, and you decided to see how far you can push me. Well, I'm up for the challenge. Are you, Sam? Sam beat against his back, but she might as well have been banging on a brick wall. Her world spun, and the next thing she knew, she was on the bed flat on her stomach. But the whole time he maneuvered her, not once did she feel any pain from her wound site. Don't fight me, Sam. I don't want you to pull your stitches, Justin demanded, in a firm voice. Ugh, I've had it with you. Let me go. She would never have admitted it in a million years, but she liked fighting back against him. She liked the feel of his big hands pinning her down. From the glitter in Justin's eyes, she thought he enjoyed it just as much. Hold her down and make sure she doesn't hurt herself, Justin commanded his brothers. Now 3 sets of hands pinned her to the mattress, and nothing she did made them let her go. She tried to buck and twist but could hardly move as their gentle hands held her firmly. Excited arousal shot through her stomach as she dug her nails into Roan's hand. Stop fighting, you little hellcat. Justin pulled her sweats and panties down her legs. Her pussy pulsed at the sudden exposure. She got as far as saying, I'll show you a hell, oh God. The first smack to her ass froze her squirming body with shock. It hadn't been hard enough to cause her pain, but it was forceful enough to heat her skin. The heat traveled around from her ass cheek into her pussy, making her sheath clench and release a gush of cream. I think our little darlin' likes getting her ass smacked. I can smell your cream from here, Sam, Chet stated in a low, rumbling voice. Sam gasped when another smack landed on her bottom. She bit her lip to hold back the moan bubbling up in her chest. How the hell can I get turned on by a spanking? Every time Justin's hand landed on her butt, he then soothed his palm over the heat. She was so turned on that she was only vaguely aware that she was arching her hips up into his touch. Turn her over, Justin commanded. Sam found herself turned over, propped up on pillows so the wound on her back was protected. Her gaze met Justin's heated stare, and she felt singed right down to her toes. Do you have any idea how fucking sexy you are? He rasped. See there. That's what I mean. You are such a hypocrite. How come you're allowed to swear, and if I do I get a spanking? Because we aren't as good with words as you are, honey. We also know that you like to be dominated, and a spanking turns you on. You are so full of fire and passion, Sam. Do you think we don't see that? We see your fire every time you look at us. And don't tell me you didn't goad us on purpose. You love what we do to you, don't you, honey? How the hell would you know what I like and don't like? You've only ever taken me once, she said breathily. That sounds like another challenge to me, Justin. What do you think? Roan inquired, giving her a lascivious smile and wink. I think you're right. You have no idea what you've just done, honey. I hope you're up to facing the consequences. He then leaned down over her, wrapped his arms around her legs and opened them wide. Oh God! She managed to get out just before Justin's mouth met her pussy. Sam cried out as Justin's tongue swept through her wet slit, and she bowed up off the bed. Hold her still, damn it. I don't want her pulling those stitches, she sobbed, as his breath and the vibrations of his voice contacting with her pussy made her shiver. I want your cock. Give it to me now, she demanded in a husky voice. Bring her down to me, Justin commanded. Sam whimpered as she was moved down the bed until her head was just below the middle and her feet were resting against the foot of the bed frame. Lifting her head with curiosity, she felt Chet and Roan move off the bed and glanced over to see they were each removing their clothes. Her gaze connected with Justin's, and she let her eyes wander over his naked body, wondering when he had removed his own garments. Getting on the bed beside her with his head near her feet, he pulled her over onto her side until her face was level with his crotch, all the while protecting her back. I need to feel your mouth on me, honey, he rasped. He held the base of his hard dick and brushed the head over her lips. Inhaling his musky scent and spying the drop of fluid on the tip, she leant forward and licked over his slit. He rewarded her by groaning loudly, and then he lowered his head back to her pussy, mewling with delight at this new position and the pleasure of having his tongue sliding through her folds. She opened her mouth and sucked him in. Oh fuck yeah. That's it, Sam. Shit. Your mouth feels like heaven, honey. Suck me down, Justin moaned. With his flavor exploding on her tongue, she hollowed her cheeks and began to greedily suckle on the tip of his cock. Moaning around his hard flesh, she began to move her mouth up and down his length as he laved her clit. Justin made sexy growling sounds as he lapped up her cream, and she bobbed her head over his cock faster, determined to make him climax before she did. Only vaguely aware of the mattress dipping behind her, she concentrated on giving him as much pleasure as he was giving her, but froze when another set of hands began to massage the cheeks of her ass. Releasing Justin's cock with a pop, she turned her head and looked over her shoulder to find Roan there. What are you doing? She asked breathlessly. I'm getting you ready, sweetness, he replied in a deep, gravelly voice. Ready for what? We are all going to take you at the same time, Sam. Now turn back around and suck Justin's cock, he directed and gave her ass a playful tap. I don't. Do you trust us, honey? Justin asked. Yes. Then just relax and let us take care of you. We won't hurt you, darlin', Chet said from above her, and she tilted her head back to see him staring at her as he lay across the top of the bed. She groaned loudly when Justin lowered his head back to her pussy, licking over her clit, and she took his cock back into her mouth, arching her hips toward him when he slid a digit into her vagina and lightly sucked on her sensitive bundle of nerves. She laved the underside of his cock with her tongue. Hearing him moan with pleasure only made her more determined to send him into climax, but she stilled again as Roan pushed the tip of a finger into her ass. She whimpered around Justin's cock as nerves she hadn't known existed zinged pulses of electrical sparks through her body. Don't tense up, sweetness. Let me in. Take a deep breath, Sam, Roan crooned to her. That's it. God, you're so fucking sexy. Try to push my finger out. Oh, yeah. See, your body craves having something in your ass now. Beside herself with hunger, Sam couldn't believe the pleasurable sensations running through her. Roan's finger was now all the way inside her ass and, with Justin's in her pussy, she felt so full and needy. 2 fingers now, sweet. Yes, that's it, try and push me out. Fuck. Her ass is so tight I can't wait to feel what it's going to do to my cock, Roan rasped. Stop, honey, Justin growled and pulled his hips away from her mouth making a popping sound as she released him. Why did you stop? Because I was too close to coming, and I want to be buried in your hot, tight pussy when I do. I have 3 fingers in her now. She's ready. Sam was about to sit up, but 3 sets of hands stopped her. Just relax, darlin'. We'll do all the work and take care of you, Chet said, through clenched teeth. She looked up at him, and the hunger in his eyes made her burn even more. Sam was so horny, her body was one big aching mass of nerves and her pussy was leaking copious amounts of her juices. Justin maneuvered until he was sitting on the side of the bed. He lifted her up using his powerful muscles and brought her onto his lap, until she was straddling his thighs facing him. We'll take this nice and slow, honey. Tell us if it's too much for you to handle. Okay. Sam gave a nod and then closed her eyes as he slowly lowered her onto his hard cock. She moaned with delight as her cunt enveloped his erection. Justin took his time with her. He didn't surge into her with one pump, but instead he thrust his hips slowly, slipping his cock in and out of her, gaining depth with every move. When he was embedded in her vagina, his dick touching her cervix, he pulled her tight against his chest. The feel of her nipples brushing against his chest hair made her groan. Another pair of hands smoothed over her shoulders and down to her back, being careful not to touch her injury, until they reached her ass, kneading the globes of her butt. Roan kissed her on the shoulder and bent until his head was next to hers, his chin resting on her shoulder. I'll take things easy with you, sweetness, but don't hesitate to tell me to. Stop if you need to. All right, Roan whispered against her ear. Sam shivered as his warm, moist breath caressed her sensitive skin, and since she didn't think she could answer just now, she nodded instead. Take a deep breath, Sam, and hold it. When you exhale, push back against me. Sweetheart. His voice had a deep cadence. Closing her eyes tight, she did what he said and pushed back. The head of his cock began to push against her anus, and then he popped through her tight sphincter muscle. Breathe in again, sweetness, and push back once more, Roan told her. Open your eyes, honey. Justin demanded. She looked up at Justin, her internal muscles clenching in reaction to the heat she saw in his gaze as he looked at her. You are so gorgeous, Sam. Just relax and let us pleasure you. Justin gasped, holding her hips firmly. Fuck. Your ass is so tight, sweetheart, but by God you feel so fucking good. Roan rasped. It burns, Sam moaned. Do you want me to stop? No. I need you, all of you, to love me. Shit, you make me feel so good. We've only just started, darlin', Chet's voice rumbled from beside her. Looking up and to the side, she found that Chet was kneeling on the bed beside her, stroking his cock in the palm of his hand, licking her lips. She imagined what he tasted like, and the thought ramped up her desire even more. Do you want my cock in that sweet mouth, darlin'? Yes, move closer, she urged him. I'm all the way in, sweetness. How are you feeling? Roan moaned. Like I'm stuffed full of cock. She giggled breathlessly. You're such a sassy little thing. Open your mouth for me, Sam, Chet demanded, and brushed the tip of his hard cock against her lips. Not needing to be told twice, she opened her mouth and licked all around the crown of his cock. Loving the taste and wanting more, she sucked him in as far as she could handle and began to bob up and down his length, paying particular attention to the sensitive spot she had found on Justin's cock when she had gone down on him. Oh yeah, darlin', that feels so good, Chet groaned. She moaned around Chet's dick when Justin lifted her slightly from his lap and thrust his rod up into her cunt. As he withdrew again, Roan slid from her ass, then surged back in. With every pump of their hips she bobbed her head, keeping in time with them while sucking on Chet's penis. Every time they advanced and retreated, sending shards of pleasure coursing through her body, they increased the pace. She kept up with them and hollowed out her cheeks with every pass over Chet's cock and slurped back down over his flesh, trying to take him to the back of her throat. You don't need to do that, darlin', Chet moaned. Don't go too far. What you're doing so far feels like heaven. She muled around his dick as Justin and Roan ramped up the speed of their cocks, shuttling in and out of her ass and pussy. Never had she felt such exquisite friction or such a deep connection to three people in her life. Her heart filled with joy as they made love with her tenderly and gave her hope for the future. Tears of emotion pricked her eyeballs and her breath hitched in her chest when she inhaled through her nose. A lump of happiness formed in her heart and she gasped around Chet's penis. The emptiness she had carried around for so long slowly dissipated until she was so full her emotions began to bubble over. Warmth permeated her pussy and womb, traveling up to her chest and filling her soul. Justin shifted a hand from her hips, tweaked a nipple between his finger and thumb, then caressed all the way down to her slit. He tapped lightly on her clit, sending waves of molten lava through her extremities, and then he gently squeezed her little nubbin and sent her over the edge into bliss. Sam screamed, the sound muffled by Chet's cock still in her mouth, shaking and jerking uncontrollably as she climaxed. Get ready, Sam. I'm gonna come, Chet rumbled. His cock swelled and jerked in her mouth, and she swallowed rapidly as his cum spewed from the tip of his penis onto her tongue and down her throat. Just as he pulled away, Roan and Justin began pounding in and out of her holes, their skin making slapping sounds as their bodies connected with hers. Justin squeezed a little more firmly on her clit. Throwing her head back, she screamed long and loud as another wave of nirvana swept over her, sending her into another climax. Roan yelled as he thrust his cock into her ass, his motion freezing as he held her hip firmly in one hand. Feeling his penis pulsing deep inside her only enhanced her own pleasure. Justin followed a moment later, shouting out as he spilled his seed into her cunt. Spasms continued to rock her body, her pussy and ass quaking until finally the last wave died. Slumping against Justin, she closed her eyes and sighed with satiation. I love you, honey. Sam heard Justin's declaration, and then his two brothers repeated his words, but she was already sinking into the land of Nod and could only smile in return.